Hi, this is John Davidson, the VIP coach, and I appreciate this opportunity to speak with you. What we're going to be talking about here is a team planning process. You're listening to this audio because your team is getting ready to make a huge jump in performance. It's very, very exciting. You're probably exploring a lot of the large ideas in the organization, the mission, the values, the goals, and the ultimate desired state that you'd like to create the organization. This is all very, very exciting. And so what I'd like to do is to kind of be a guide, is to be someone that can provide you the foresight into how this process works, to understand how to orient yourself into a creative process, co-creatively as a team, and also individually in terms of what you choose to create. This is all a very interesting set of techniques and ideas to think about creating something, to bring something into being that doesn't exist yet, brings a lot of new energy, especially to teams that have been working together for some time, and then also bringing in new team members that have yet to work with the team and pursue a noble outcome. One of the biggest challenges of small businesses today is that they don't have noble guiding ideas. That the employees look at the team looks at the mission, the values, they look at the big ideas that are driving decisions in the organization, and they're just nowhere near them. That work has gotten so incessantly frenetic, that we're so drawn in and distracted by so many day-to-day details, that literally very little of our activity, of our conscious work, our mindful work, is anchored to a larger idea. We are overwhelmed with job descriptions, with requirements, with sudden problems, with circumstances, that it's easy to remain in a reaction and response orientation to what we're doing. Yet our work, we spend more hours at our work than we do even our own marriage. We spend enormous amount of hours at work. And a lot of us have ideas about what work should be or shouldn't be, that work is supposed to be something to grind through. Or sometimes we need to make sure work is worthwhile, so we need to make it difficult enough to think we've earned something that we consider successful. But in my eyes, work is a place for people to express their most incredible talents, unique abilities, to click into guiding ideas, noble ideas that truly are rewarding. Because at the end of your life, when you get out your report card and you look back, you're not going to be saying, oh boy, I wish I had done another piece of work that I didn't care about doing. You're going to say, we really did something. We really brought something quite special into the world. And our business was about bringing something into the world that maybe didn't exist yet, or maybe there was something in the world like us, but we did it better. So as a team, you might be asking yourself, are we really a team? Do we make a team? How do we know that a team is a good team? I think we can know that we're not a good team, and we know what that looks like. We don't trust each other. We don't understand each other's talents and abilities and how we depend on each other. A team is a group of people that depends on one another to get something done. Can I repeat that? A team is a group of people that depend on one another to get something done. They depend on one another. So what do they depend on? Well, they depend on talents, contributions, an understanding of the overall goal, having ideas or having a clearer notion of what the plan is and how we're going to get from A to B and what our role is in it. Having an understanding of other people's abilities and strengths in the system and how those line up to our own. Having a plan with milestones so that we can reflect and measure change from where we were to where we are and look downrange at where we're going. To have some sense of glue and mission that holds us all together so that we are unified by some guiding ideas such as the values or the mission, the goals, and the vivid description in the future of the organization. But you see, what breaks a team apart are deadly dynamics that happen in a team that cause us to not trust one another. There are a lot of complexities that take place in a team. But I think the one thing that is the game changer in all teams is the capacity to tell the truth. That when we have agendas to hide information from each other because of our own models or assumptions, our fears, our cynicism, our judgment, we withhold information. And if I asked any management team what the most important quality is that makes their organization healthy, it's the quality of information that comes from their people. If we lose the capacity to tell the truth, there's obviously something more important that we need to tell, and it isn't the truth. It would be lying, or it would be withholding information. But in the business world today, things are so complex for leaders that they truly depend on people more than ever. That as a leader, you depend on a group of specialists who know more about what they're doing technically, tactically than you do. You can't possibly do it all, therefore you can't know it all. So you depend on a group of people to share information with you, to get visibility, and to be resourceful, and to be responsive. So when information is constricted in an organization, it's because there are various psychological barriers, emotional barriers. There are deadly dynamics that mislead the truth from being told. I like to think of shared vision work, or the process of becoming a team through learning the shared vision of the team, is truly a team that learns how to learn. They learn how to connect. They learn how to create. They learn how to practice telling the truth. That they practice a way to feel safe, to open up, tell the elephant in the room, be frank, state the good, the bad, and the ugly, so that whatever is private inside can become public outside. So I invite you on a journey into shared vision, a journey into a commitment to the truth about where things are compared to where you want to go as a team, and to put together a scheme, a plan, a strategy, an executable action plan so that you can bring the vision into being even better than you imagined it. I think one of the things we often learn in the creative process as a team is that things never quite go as expected. Nothing really goes in a straight line. You're probably laughing as I'm saying this because you've had so many moments in your life, in your personal life, where that is so true. And there are so many nuances that we would have never expected as we begin to move into a creative process. You can remember a time when you set out to cook something in your home and you realized that you were missing certain ingredients and you had to improvise. Or that you were creating something with your teenager or your little kiddo and things didn't go as expected, but it was great how you incorporated it and remained in the creative process, even though things didn't go as expected. So, being a team is about a group of people who depend on one another to get something done. And what they're going to get done is something that we commonly care about. Do we have to care? No. Can we choose to care? Yes. And this brings me to talk about reflection. That there are teams that reflect and value the quality of reflection, and there are teams that don't. But there are teams that are too busy being busy to get to something that would make them a lot less busy. It's like saying, look, if I'm always tactical and I'm always doing and doing and doing, I'm kind of a hopeless doer because I may be taking care of the to-do list and taking care of the problems, but am I really moving towards an outcome? I find that a lot of teams are talking about problems that are coming up. You know, whatever's screaming the loudest in the organization is what organizes our priority list. But we may be able to remove all the problems and still not have what we want. That we often miss that we're doing demolition instead of architecture. That the underlying structure or the fundamental motif of the team that's driving it, that's telling its narrative, that is organizing its global action is we have problems to solve. Now, every team has problems, right? Organizations are problems. It's a problematic environment. There are things that will happen. There are surprise attacks. There are parachute moments, things that parachute on you didn't expect. There are sudden turns and tribulations. You might even say, boy, I feel powerless. I can't get to anything. It feels fatalized. Why even try? And yet, you still have the capacity to choose and choose things that do matter to you. And this is a very important point, is that in the organization, we often are organized not only by problems, but we have certain ideals of what we should do or what should matter instead of what really does matter. Now, what this gets down to is a question of energies, that when the team is involved at a level of things that do matter, you can tell. You're a customer. You can go into their organization. You can tell there's a shared vision at play. People really care about something around here. I mean, I remember walking into Disney for the first time, and I remember seeing a person in the bathroom being so careful and calibrated about the way they did their work. You know, I stereotype it as this is a bathroom job, but the way they saw it, they were cast members, and they were cleaning the restroom because they were creating the happiest place on earth. And they knew that that restroom was a reflection of the entire park experience. They knew that that was a fractal of the entire message that they wanted to send to the person visiting the park. Now, that just amazed me. But you could, if you stood back and you watched these people did what they did, the characters, the people operating the rides, the people behind the food and beverage, the band members, the cast members, everyone in that park was somehow unified by one big idea that this was the happiest place on earth. And Walt Disney taught them that by the time that a guest would leave the park, they were never going to be the same person again. That when you walked through the gate of Disneyland, you left your life outside, you were changed and modified, and then you were put back into your life. They looked at it like a journey, and they were unified around the nobility of that idea. That was the big idea that kind of swept them all up into becoming cast members, making interviews out of auditions, and auditions out of interviews for new staff members, having a green room. It was cult-like, really. And so with all that said, everyone knew kind of what their automatic role would be. They knew kind of where they needed to be, how they needed to attack their work. They all kind of felt a convergence, a unity by guiding ideas. The guiding ideas about what the common voice was of the group. It was a choral voice of here's what we are depending on one another to do, to produce this happiest place on earth, and we each have a part. I look at it like an orchestra and a conductor. You know, the conductor plays a very important part in holding it all together, keeping individuals on pace, helping them flow into other parts of the symphony that is playing, the strings and the percussion. But if we pull back and we look at it as a whole, as the orchestra, everyone has a unique part to play. They may have a unique ability or unique part in the music that they play, but then there's the macro music that they play in its entirety, and it's a unity of sound that we want to sit there and hear when we're watching as an audience. We're just in awe about how it's all played together in one. Yes, there are differences in the group. Nobody is the same. They all bring a unique talent and DNA to the group. They're all distinguished as the trombone player and the guitar player and the pianist and the choral singers and so forth, and this and the horn section and the violins and all this and the cello, and yet they all have a unified ensemble. They all have a unification of sound so that together they are not the same alone. So I intend to give you, upon these principles, a way forward in creating a shared vision, in having a shared understanding of what is actually going on relative to that vision, and having a strategic action vision about how to get from A to B from the standpoint of the overall team, and also from your own role, the activities that you're measured by, and the meetings and the reporting that you show up with to give a dashboard as to where we are at all times. So, welcome to the team planning process. This is very exciting. It is a fundamental choice to choose what you want to create. Choosing what you want to create takes some practice, because it means that we're not creating out of something situational. I mean, asking the question, what kind of company do we want to create, is not asking the question, what kind of company do we want to avoid? Or what is the company we now have and how should we change it? Or what's the problem with the current company that we have? When we take action to remove something, we're just problem solving, but we're not creating. There's a very different flow and sequence when we're in a problem-solving structure or pattern versus a creative pattern. A creative pattern is when we cause something to exist because we love it first, and then we decide to create it. There's two steps. We love it, and then we decide. Creating always starts with love. So creating starts with conceptualization. When Alfred Hitchcock would imagine the next film, he would form a vision. He would start to conceive of a story. He would call it learning the vision of the film. In fact, it was his favorite part. The editing and all the other furthering parts to fulfill the film and get it to the theater and get the audience to it, that was the part he just thought was drudgery. He thought it was dread. But the part that was most energizing was at the moment that the artist saw the vision. Visions are not obligational. They are choice. They're not obligatory. They're optional. A lot of our lives, we organize action around what we're obligated to do. But when we are thinking and considering and conceiving of a place to go, We don't have to create it. You know, it's like music. Music doesn't come into the world because it solves a problem. Music doesn't come into the world because we're obligated to create it. Sure, certainly someone has a professional side to it where they are paid for creating music, and they have to pay their expenses out of playing that music. But like Peter Drucker said, you know, if we think that that obligation is what it's really about, we've lost it. Great work comes from loving what we do and doing what we love, as Steve Jobs said. Yes, the profits of a business are oxygen, but if we think it's about breathing, we're lost. So great businesses do great things, make great contributions to the world by having very bold and impossible and exciting goals. When John F. Kennedy said, let's put a man on the moon, it was immediately clear no one knew how to do it. But when we're considering a future that matters to us, we leave the past. We don't think of what's practical or what's realistic. In fact, the reasons why we go to the realistic or practical frame is because we don't want to be disappointed. We want to do what's achievable because we don't want to do what we don't know how to do. And yet vision is about growing. When we set a vision, when we set a place to go that we are beyond knowing how, it creates the best place to learn. Learning is based on creating. Learning is creating. It's creating something that we don't know. We start with zeros. We start from nothing by asking the question, what do we want to create? Not what do we want to resolve, not what do we want to get rid of. No, it's not push, it's pull. It's coming up with an idea, an image, a picture, a lovely picture of the future that we seek to create. In fact, if I look in Webster's dictionary, a vision is something seen in a dream that manifests the senses. It comes from the word visio in Italian, which means to see. When we see an evocative image, a fairy tale, an imaginary image that does something to us. You see, it's not what the vision is, it's what it does to us. If we only focused on the things that we knew how to create, why would we change any behavior? Why would we interrupt the past? We wouldn't. We would still remain the same. We would be the same people. Well, that's the point, is that when you start to put your sights on something bigger, you take away the conceptual limitations. Yeah, you pull the past off your eyes. It'd be like me asking you, look, if I put $40 million in your personal bank account, what would you do with the money? You have unlimited time, you have unlimited money, and you knew you couldn't fail. Here's some silence to let that sink in. You see where your mind went? It was like the prison bars had melted. Your mind started thinking about things that you probably hadn't thought about. You started coming up with childhood dreams. You've had dreams all along in your life. Dreams are lovely images that manifest the senses. It's something seen in a trance or ecstasy. That is what vision is. You know what's neat is you're in a country on the planet where dreaming is a cultural force. It's talked about on the sidewalk that this is the only country on the planet where you can grow up and become president. So impossible dreams are a cultural force. I mean, you can ask yourself, what do I want to create, knowing that everything in the future is up for grabs. And that isn't positive thinking. You can rethink your company or rethink your life at any time. A vision is different than a goal. A goal is an endpoint. It's a terminal point. It's a marker. It's a benchmark. It's an end by which we keep score. So if the vision for me is going to the beach and taking my shirt off and feeling great, and that image that I have does something to me, that's envisioning. That's the capacity to foster a vision. But a goal is an aim by which I would keep score. So I might say, well, how would I know whether I'm getting there or not? Well, I have a 32-inch waist. I'm going to measure my waistline. Or I'm going to measure my level, my fat percentage, my fat content, maybe my body mass index. So that might be a metric. You see, a goal doesn't offer the motivation that a vision does. The vision offers the why, the big why. The vision offers us that cultivated motivation, that compelling reason, that love we have for wanting something, like Robert Frost said, for its own sake. The best visions are created out of the love that we have for the vision itself. Not because it resolves a problem or not because it's a means. It truly is a means. It is an end in mind. It is a terminal point. But it's an envisioned terminal point. So let's not confuse a goal with a vision because they are close roommates. In fact, a goal helps us see what kind of distance we have to go and what kind of distance we've made. This is very important data so that we can reflect on the reasons why it's working or not working, and we can effectively increase our capacity to improve our distance toward the vision. Now, a plan is different than a goal or a vision. A plan is a scheme. It's a means. It's a set of steps. It's a process. It's a way between point A and point B. So we might start with vision and then set some metrics that form goals, and then set up a plan by looking at where we are compared to those goals relevantly in terms of how we need to get there. If I fly to New York and I know that I'm in LA, I'm going to construct a plan based on the distance that I have to go. I'm going to look at how I'm going to get there. Am I going to fly by plane? Am I going to take a car? How am I going to do it? If I thought that I was in Chicago, I might not have the appropriate amount of fuel, and I might run out of fuel because I'm actually in Los Angeles. So if I don't really know where I am compared to where I want to be, I'm going to have a problem with my plan. A value is an enduring principle. A value is something that stands through time. It's a guiding principle. It's something that organizes our decisions and actions, but it is an enduring principle or guiding principle, such as trust, integrity, things like that, that organize your behavior. An ideal is a standard. An ideal is a standard that we impose on ourselves, and we know when we're in ideals when we should do something. Ideals are something I recommend that you get rid of, because ideals are perfectionisms that we never are able to live up to. Values are different than ideals in that you know when you're operating according to your values and you know when you're not. It's easy to steer it back on track because you're out of alignment with your values. Your values are something fundamental to you that you can get expressed through whatever you're doing. Knowing what really matters to you at any moment is a way for you to align your decisions with these values. When we consider vision, we use what matters to you as the formative structure. These are the ingredients for the recipe. What matters to you is something that you don't have to justify. So when you say, I truly want that vision, that's a choice. And when you say, I truly don't want that vision, that's a choice. You understand that I'm implying that you be true to yourself. You see, a lot of organizations are top-down. The president will get up at their annual meeting and say, let's talk about our vision. No one's ever seen the vision before, but suddenly it's laminated and the president sits up and says, this is our vision. People start looking at each other and saying, how did he get to ours? This isn't our vision, this is his vision. And we think that at the moment of lamination, things are going to actually start happening. But a shared vision is a coexistence of personal visions. So when the president says, or the leader says, well, this is our vision, that's a dictated vision. That's command and compliance. That's not a vision. That means I have an idea and you better follow it. That's very fear-based. It's control-based. I haven't seen those organizations that give orders and follow it be very competitive. If you look at the top-performing organizations today, like Google, for example, they are so egalitarian and collaborative. Almost everyone in the organization is an owner, and they all operate from constant communication around vision. What mattered to them yesterday matters more now, and what mattered now will not matter in the future. But they're always coming back to what is our real work? Where are we going towards? That is a conversation that's prevailing on every level, from high to low, from the local front lines to the executive wheelhouse. So what they're always doing is flattening the hierarchy. They have an org chart so people know who to communicate with, and there is some order, but they behave in a horizontal way. Authority and decisions are moved out to the local lines. You'd know that by calling a customer service person. I mean, they have really incredible authority. You don't have to talk to a supervisor to get big decisions made. So they authorize people at all levels in the organization to give the right care to the overall company. And it's a very fascinating thing, and I think it offers a certain advantage, an unfair advantage to them in the marketplace to have so much authority moving out from the center. They decentralize, and it's actually practiced. So you can kind of tell what kind of conversation they're having on the inside. Now, organizations may have come from a command and compliance type atmosphere, and there's a very successful group of organizations that do that, but they reach a limit. Because what people really want today inside organizations is to have meaningful work. They want to get behind noble ideas. They want to be of use to the organization. They want to be contributory to the organization. I know as you're listening to this, you're probably resonating with this, that you really truly want to do something with your gifts. You want to find a home to park those gifts. You want to find others that see those gifts and find places where they can grow. You want to see opportunities for you to self-actualize, to be able to find yourself and apply yourself within a larger framework, to be able to choose and to autonomize yourself and to find ways for yourself to add value, provide direction, relationship, confidence in others, and be there for them and yourself. That part of the way for you to get happy is to create what matters to you. So in this sense, you're going to be co-creating something that matters to you. A shared vision is not command and compliance. A shared vision is a coexistence of personal visions where people choose the vision. You know when you have one because holistically you can see it in the numbers. If you look at a profit over a year, if there's high levels of production, if people are doing what they're doing, they had to have had some common caring about it to hit the levels that they did, to do more than what was expected with the work ethic that they have, to resolve the problems at the level of expediency and attack because they really do want to get somewhere and they care about it. But at the same time, this shared vision, it offers a bigger idea to attend to. That a lot of times when a shared vision is talked about, when we want to create something together, the pettiness comes down. Suddenly, instead of like a dog that's pooping all over the house and chasing trucks with a bunch of mischief, we quit fueling the problems and the differences between each other, and we're able to accept and tolerate the diversity. Today, teams are very diverse. They're culturally diverse. So it's highly important to bring shared vision and reflection into the room. Reflection is the only antidote to really changing our history. Reflection is the quality of inquire that a team has. The inquiry is to ask, what do we really want to create? And the inquiry is also, how did we get to what we actually have? So it's do some suspension, and suspension means that you take your conceptual limits off and you consider what future you want to create. Now, there are different attitudes toward the vision. I've seen organizations with several types of attitudes towards the vision, and you might ask yourself which attitude you occupy or which ones you see in others. Attitude number one is what I call commitment and enrollment, and at this level, I call it the co-creative state. It means truly the team, the people in the organization embody the guiding ideas, the destination the organization wants to go. So that this coexistence is an alignment of personal visions that together, like the orchestra, moves in a common direction. Commitment and enrollment is, I truly want the vision. The next level is compliance, which is a soldier, is to saying, aye, commander, I will meet the requirements, I'm in, but I won't look at the rules. In other words, I won't set new rules. I'm going to follow the rules that are given to me. So my change effort is just to show up and to do things excellently. You have the answers, I don't, and so forth. This puts a lot of burden more on the business owner or the leader because they're the one down the hallway thinking for the organization instead of getting people thinking for it. So if there's too much command and compliance, the problem is that there's very few at the top that are thinking about the organization instead of few all around the organization really thinking about what it wants. And this can cause all sorts of strains and exhaustion for people at the top. Hence, part of delegation is really asking and tapping into these questions at all levels. What do we want to create? Toward what do you want to contribute? What kind of organization do you want to be a part of? That's the stewardship leader model. And that's the one that I suggest. I think there's a lot more that gets done that way. And within that means that the leader's role is to consent, is to get people to consent and to confront other people's freedom. And so this means that as an employee, when you are in compliance, there's some interesting models that we carry about that in terms of what the boss is or what the boss is supposed to do, that they have answers for me, that they're going to make the future best for me, that they're my caretaker, they're a hero to me, they're a lifeguard by the pool. And this stuns growth. because it's out of proportion. That means that the employee is shut down and the boss has all the answers. It's patriarchal. It's colonial. So really the employee is the boss's project, and the employee is incomplete. And it creates a consumerism. And so what happens is that the boss starts to convert the employee into a performer and then steals his or her humanity. So instead of choice, it's about direction given. It's about instruction. Education, though, the word educate means to lead something out. To educate someone is to lead something out. To instruct is to put something in. So the boss's educator is no longer the hero. In fact, the hero becomes the coach. Now, the coach's role is to know the employee's capacity, and that means both the good side and the bad side. That means knowing the strengths and weaknesses of the team that he or she has, which requires honesty and accuracy about what the team can or cannot do. So there's circularity here, is that if the team is not clear about where they are, how they are compared to where they're supposed to be in terms of their skills and strengths and abilities, then the leader has no visibility on how to be resourceful or how to help. So you as the employee depend on the leader for help, but part of that helping process is to know that you may not know everything where you need help. There's invisible help that you need, and there's a letting go of the ego there in letting the leader participate in defining your needs for help. And the leader's job is to keep their answers in check. I remember a meeting once where a leader walked in and said, "Look, guys, I don't have the answers on how we're going to get through this or how we're going to get over there where we said. But I know we have a lot of horsepower in this room, and if we really think, if we really look at what's going on with solutions and we start coming up with ideas, I know that we're going to make something happen." There's never a guarantee that the future is going to be where it should be. You cannot predict the future, but you can create one together. And the learning that you acquire and the heuristic discoveries that you make in learning is just as great as the reward, as the end in mind. The process is its own reward. So in the creative process, the boss is enacting with the group as a co-creative person in committing and enrolling themselves, if that's the attitude, and that there will be experimentation. There will be things that go wrong. You will eat failure flakes for breakfast, and there will be learning from those mistakes. I mean, how else do you really learn instead of doing something? You have to do something, right? It's kind of ready, fire, aim, not ready, aim, fire. Ready, aim, fire is a recipe for procrastination. That means we got to get ready 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 to get ready, and then nothing happens, and our goals are the same next year as they were last year. We had to get ready 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 because we don't want to launch something until it's perfect. But really, you don't learn until you act instantly on something. So what makes us trust it? We have to trust our decisions. How do we trust our decisions? We're committed and enrolled. We're committed and enrolled to creating the vision. We understand that the way to get there is we're going to have moments where things go off course. It's the recovery. It's not how often they go off. It's how we get back on. So command and compliance is extremely patriarchal. It puts the boss in the position of you have answers for me and I don't. And yet a lot of organizations operate that way, that the leadership contributes to a model that will be dealt that way, that, look, I'm in command, you do what I say, I pay you, and you get things done. But we don't see the injury. We injure people's power. On the other hand, we have to be careful not to give away so much power because people can get runaway power, and that we don't get depended on as bosses for coaching and mentoring and keeping the context clear. So there's a balance that has to be struck between the right level of delegation and not, and giving people the authority and giving them the tools and resources to run with it and treating them like adults. It's not about dictating, it's about inviting. And leadership is about inviting someone on a quest that they want to go on. I heard it once said after a great achievement that when I asked the team why they did it, they didn't say because we had a great leader. They didn't say because we knew what to do. They said we did it for ourselves, meaning we chose to do it. We knew what was right, we saw what was needed, we did it, and we took the chance. And it's some moments like that where you have to take those risks, where real commitment and enrollment prevails through your motivation and your behavior. That you realize that you are all truly co-creators in this business. The third attitude is the attitude of grudging compliance. And this is the attitude of, I don't buy the vision, but I will still keep my job and I'll get things done. But I really am not quite, I'm showing that I'm kind of not on board. And then, of course, there's non-compliance, which is, I won't do it, you can't make me, my arms are folded. And then there's apathetic, which is it 5 o'clock yet? This is a job, I'll just get my payroll and go home. And organizations that have grudging compliance and non-compliance and apathy, it really hurts. There's a group of outsiders that are often in the organization inevitably that the insiders are attempting to convert. And there's a group of insiders that are really going after the vision. Now, about 20% of the organization might be responsible for 80% of carrying the burden. So it means for the leader not to try to convey or convince the vision to all the non-compliance and the grudging compliance and the apathies. We don't want to water weeds. There will be ones in the organization that need to be pulled. But instead, be wired for sound, and that these are true realities of the landscape of an organization. There's no such thing as buy-in. Buy-in, right? There's no such thing as buying in. You can't buy anybody. Buy-in is a choice. Buy-in is I choose. Buy-in is I want. I have an alternative future that I want, and I'm willing to get it, and I want to contribute to getting it. And so again, the boss's role is to help the person move from being a reactionary compliant to a bold creator, a serial creator who chooses. And the boss's role isn't to be the villain or the persecutor, rather to be the challenger and to challenge people to go to new levels. So rather than being a victim or the compliant one, they move to the creator. The boss moves from the hero to being a coach, and the persecutor moves to being the challenger. This is a empowerment triangle. And this triangle, when it is at play, it really suits the organization with a great structure. And so I want to give this to you. I'm giving this to you so you have some visibility on what it looks like when it's working well. Is that you are occupying the true nature of being the creator. The creator is the one who wants something, brings it into being because they decide to. They make choices in support of higher choices. A vision is a higher choice that you seek to create. It's a noble idea that you choose to or not choose to. So whether you create it or not, whether you decide to or not, is the question. You don't have to. Now, you can take the position of compliance, grudging compliance, non-compliance, apathy, but there's consequences to that as the organization slows down like barnacles on the bottom of a boat. The organization starts to go negative and heavy, that people have to be carried, and management becomes heavy. And that management is about being tough and asking people to do things, and then HR is about discipline, and then people get disciplined. It's often because there's really no shared vision. It's not even being talked about. There's just work getting done. And it's also because we've been brainwashed to think that our identities are about just tasking, getting things done. It's pretty scary to stop and think and reflect on what's really important or what matters to us. And envisioning is difficult because sometimes our visions that we have are so personal, they may be different from other people in the organization. We worry about being isolated or rejected, that it won't be consistent. And yet organizations that foster alignment mean they listen to diversity, they favor diversity and differences, they capitalize on it. That it would be phony to all be in agreement, that we wouldn't be individuals if we were in agreement, we wouldn't be real, and if we're not real, we have to expend ourselves. Who wants to be part of a work group that you can't be yourself in? That gets really tiring. You don't want to wear a mask to work or costume that you kind of like it, but you really don't, because it's not safe. So it requires listening to the other, understanding that there will be differences, that we act as the other being the legitimate other, that we all have different views, and that's a product of our nature. We all have different DNA. We have different desires. We have different ways of looking at things. We have different composed talents and unique abilities that we'll take aim with. So the ideal isn't, hey, we got to put it all together, and if we're in agreement, this is going to work. I mean, sometimes just teams will hash out because they aren't in an agreement. You don't have to be in agreement. In fact, you can't. I remember the founding fathers, the story about them getting together. It took them 7 days to make one sentence. We hold these truths to be self-evident. We hold these truths to be self-evident. It took them 7 days to argue about that and persuade each other because they all had differences, but they were genuinely disagreeing about that. There was happy contention about that. Envisioning is also difficult because we may have some serious doubts. We may have some fatalism about whether it can really happen. I find oftentimes creators, they've got a lot on thinking new because they feel that that is absolutely impossible. They've seen destructive behavior in the organization. They were expecting things, they were let down, they went cynical, and they try to look towards the future, but it's like being short-circuited, and you have to let that go. There's no way to complete the past. It's history. In fact, the only way to complete it is to know that it's not completable and put it where it is. And then look toward the planning horizon, and then choose to create what you want. So envisioning might be relatively difficult. It takes some practice because it may not be an agreement, and it may seem like we shouldn't wish for it because we may not get it. I don't want to be disappointed, right? That's a classic cliche. Or we feel powerless to create it. Or I don't have the power because of where I sit in this organization. I'm not going to make much change based on how I see it. Those are very fatalizing models that shut us down from contributing and voicing something that may really matter. I've seen receptionists in the organization transform organizations. If they thought they were a peon and forgot they were the voice of the organization, well, I guess that would have been truly consequential. But once this person got into a management meeting and the management meeting took her seriously, what she gave them was she gave them a new innovative idea that transformed the organization forever. When Bill Gates was in Microsoft, he was sending out a letter to the organization about what he wanted to create, and then suddenly his salespeople came to him and ignited the fire and said, "You have to go into the internet." He wasn't even looking there. But he knew that they were in touch with the market, so he trusted them. And that made all the difference. That was a swooping change for the next step or evolution of the company. Personal mastery is creating what matters to you. Personal mastery means living and organizing your life around what you love, what you really, really, truly want. I don't think the secret is about being happy. I think what people truly want is to be involved in what they're doing because they get tremendous pleasure from being involved in something that means something to them, even to the point where the actions they're taking aren't necessarily comfortable or aren't necessarily skillful, something that they feel they're most skilled at, even if it's a weakness. As long as they're learning into what they're wanting to create, there's something about the involvement in life that transforms them, their relationship with themselves, and also it changes the way they relate with time. That when we're creating something, time moves differently. Have you noticed that? You come out of a creative process and you say, where'd all that time go? Something involves us at a very, very deep level. It's very sad when I hear someone just going to work, and that work becomes kind of walking the procession of the living dead. Is they're forgetting to ask those beautiful questions of what am I doing with this wild and precious life that I've been given? Am I really taking advantage of all the opportunities that I have to grow, contribute? If I have so much music in me to play, why am I not deciding to play it all? When I came to Earth, I came with a plan, something on my tabloid. Am I doing what I came for? Those are the questions. Those are the fundamental questions in personal mastery. What do I really long for? When I think about my obituary, what do I want that to be saying about me? How do I want to go out? If you made a list of the 10 people that were your supply lines to get there, to get here, now, the person that you are, and you were to for a moment really reflect on those people's gifts and contributions and how they looked after you and how they just came at the perfect time, how they came into your life, you get all warm and fuzzy inside. You might even come to tears to think about how grateful you are for the shoulders that you stand on. You wouldn't forget it. You would appreciate that it took that kind of effort. It's that kind of love and appreciation. And that's what it can be about, is to stand on other people's shoulders. But we've closed up. We've let the walls go up because it's just too vulnerable to trust that someone else has got my back. That we often think that everyone is building on self-interest instead of self-giving. But I found that to be very untrue, that humans are a very loving species. The reason why we've taken ourselves to be self-interested is because people have retracted. And we've seen them in a state of fear where they do not want to put themselves out there or be vulnerable. But then we reinforce it more when we ourselves retract, and then we negate love from others, and they also retroactively or they retaliate according to the way we're putting it out. We reap what we sow. So personal mastery starts with coming back into touch with a lost or hidden part of ourselves, the dreamer, the adventurer, the one that goes on the quest, the fantasizer, the hero in the sense that we are going somewhere that we have not been before, like Captain Kirk. We're going into a new frontier, which is exciting. Anytime we make space for something new, new energy comes. But you know, there's a second part of personal mastery, and it has to do with clear-minded thinking. It has to do with a direct relationship with life where we can experience the current reality as to where we are compared to where we want to be. Our human potential movement has programmed us to think more positively, that we think that thoughts are our enemy. But in reality, positive thinking is positive lying. I'm not being cynical or a realist here. All I'm saying to you is if you don't have a clear picture of where you are compared to where you want to be, you will not make the strategic decisions necessary to efficiently and effectively create where you want to go. If I want to take a navigating trip to sail to Hawaii, and I deny what the ocean is capable of, and I don't prepare for the squalls that are there because I think that positively thinking means that I'm going to have honky-dory weather all the time, I'm completely out of touch with what's actually going on. The size of boat that I'm on, the level of readiness that I have as a sailor, the good, the bad, and the ugly going into the experience. Overconfidence is truly terrorism. We have a bad case in our culture of overconfidence. I think we do because we don't want the bad news that we don't know what we're doing. We're afraid to confront the truth, especially when it comes to ourselves, because we've attempted to paint a picture to the world of who we are because we don't think we're that. We hide ourselves from the world. We don't want people to see our ugliness. We hide our faces from the world because we've deemed ourselves as unacceptable. So we form a pretentious false self to make people love us because we think if we will show that part of ourselves that we do not like, that we are feeling inadequate about, that we will truly not belong, and we don't want to feel isolated. We are beings that are meant to belong. So there's something courageous about sidelining that and not falling into our concepts about ourselves, but coming to ourselves truly. And personal mastery is about confronting ourselves honestly. It's a fundamental choice to be true to yourself. Sometimes you'll have to come to the term that you do not know what you're doing. When I learned how to sailboard in Malibu Beach in California when I was 19, here I was, this young buck. It was July, the water was getting warmer, and there were people and teenagers all over the place, and here's John out there learning how to sailboard. I was getting rocked in the surf. My coach was signaling to me from the beach, telling me not to swim in. The whole time I wanted to because my peers were looking at me and I felt stupid. But then he reminded me that everyone looks like a fool in the creative process in the beginning stages. That when we start learning what we're doing toward what we want to create, we're going to fall off more than anything. He called it eating failure flakes for breakfast. I didn't know that he was giving me a life skill. Personal mastery was about me recognizing where I was on sailboarding compared to where I wanted to be. So I started being clear to myself about the facts. I wasn't balanced on my left foot. I didn't have my right-handedness that was on the sail the right way. And I didn't know how to tread into waves that were coming in. And I had to clearly, at each time I got back up, state where I was. And every time I did, it fostered a resourceful step that I was able to see where to go next. Can you imagine? I mean, I had this other urge to look good and to be approved and to look like I was knowing what I was doing, but I had to dispose of all that courageously and just stay with the brutal honesty of what I didn't know how to do. I knocked out all my teeth that entire summer. I came home to my mom's house and she said, "Oh my gosh," and I didn't have those teeth. That was pretty confronting because that also didn't make me look too good. I had cuts and bruises on my cheeks because I was getting knocked around in the waves. But I had bigger business to attend to. I really, truly wanted to learn how to sailboard. And I made a choice to learn how to sailboard. Now, in between where I was and where I wanted to be was a powerful force called structural tension. That when I formed a reference point between where I was and where I wanted to be, there was a tension that was seeking resolution. And so my coach on the beach took out a rubber band and he stretched it between his two hands and he said, JD, over here on the right hand is your vision of the way you want to be sailboarding. You know, the one you told me when you hired me and you rented the sailboard. You wanted to be out there and skimming the waves, and you wanted to be able to enjoy the freedom and the air and all those lovely, lovely conditions that you wanted to be into. And I said, yeah, oh my gosh, that's really, really what I want. I want to be able to do that. And he said, well, then you really need to know the current reality of where you are. And when you know that current reality, the good, the bad, and the ugly, like learning the piano or learning a language, what you're doing is you're forming this structural tension. And he stretched the rubber band between his fingers, and he said, do you see how this tension's working? And then he said he let go of his left hand, and he said, what happens to the tension when you don't have a picture of current reality? And I said, you have no force to work with. He said, right. He said, that's like an archer in the bow. It'd be like not having a bow stretched. You think the arrow would go very far? And he said, no. And I said, no. And then he said, it's kind of like the flames between the logs. The farther they are apart, the higher the flames burn. And I said, boy, yeah, that's the metaphor. And he said, so when you're not honest with yourself and you're not in love with what you want to create, those honesty and love elements, when you're not in those 2 points of reference, you lose the tension. And he thought, and I thought, that's a real conscious process. And he said, that's right. He said, instinctively, you resolved that tension when you were younger, when you wanted the milk as a baby and there wasn't milk in your tummy, and you resolved it by crying and you got milk in you. We're always in tension resolution systems. It's kind of the way the natural world is made up, is that we're resolving tension between 2 points. So we can take advantage of this in the creative process. We learn this in music school, but we don't learn it in our lives or creating commerce or creating other things. But it truly is the bones of the creative process. Personal mastery is having a moment-to-moment awareness of what I really have going on. But yet my brain is programmed to edit what's going on. Because when I'm in my habituated thinking, I'm kind of downloading what's actually going on over the present like a veneer, and I'm seeing my own seeing. So most of us, we're operating in the world in a theoretical view. The word theory means theater. We've acquired all these memories over time that we expect certain things, we impose what it should be, we start interpreting and adding meaning to what's going on instead of staying with just the present moment. So he said, JD, when you go out there, step into it again, but just stay with the present moment. Don't get caught in it. Don't get angry. Don't argue with it. If you're feeling frustrated, that's all part of it. And he said, as you're closing the gap, it's a process of assimilation. I said, what's that? And he said, well, there's going to be days when you go home and it feels like nothing's happening. But as a creator, you know that that's a part where you are creating something. It's just in the process of resolving it. And he said, if nothing's happening, that's also part of current reality. And it tells you what to do next. And he said, that's right. My learning started to really accelerate. And he said, JD, he said, how much intestinal fortitude do you think you have to hold this tension? And I said, well, not much, because I'm desperately wanting to learn. And he said, well, if you're going to hold the tension, that's the trick. And he said, not a lot of people are tolerant, and that's why they don't get all the way to getting to the sailboarding, because they compromise. And I said, what'd that look like? And he said, well, take the right hand away from the rubber band. It's flimsy. He said, there's no place to go anymore. He said, you just compromise and say, well, instead of 3 months at it, I'll just go with 2 weeks, and you rationalize it, you compromise. And he said, that's unfortunate, because people can't tolerate the tension. And then he said, JD, it's easy to mistake the structural tension, the discrepancy between these points that seeks resolution, with emotional tension. And he said sometimes what creators will do when they come out here is they'll make their standard of reference their emotions. They're angry and they want to break the board, or they start to step into the sailing and they try to handle it so far, they try to compensate by manipulation and control that they lose the finesse. And they actually create their own instability. And I said, but that makes a lot of sense. And he said, so it's important that I distinguish between emotional tension, the frustration, through that assimilation time, the delays, the pressure, and then also stay with the creative tension or the structural tension. And he said, you just need to play more into the structural tension and just not be at issue with the emotional tension. Let it be there. Let it be part of your current reality. And I said, that's really trick. That's brilliant. I can apply that to everything. And I learned how to sailboard, and I got all the way to my vision, and I didn't lower it, and today it's one of the neatest things to do. And I'm very grateful for those principles, that fundamental principle that tension seeks resolution. And we can embrace current reality, and that had I positively thought about stuff, I would have been out of touch with where I really was. I would have lessened the tension. I would have moved current reality closer to the vision by compromising it or positively thinking. And he said, what a lot of other people do too is they compensate by putting willpower out there. I'm going to do it. I'm going to slay the dragon. Watch me do this. And then that becomes the means to not learning it. And he said also what they do is they create conflict. So what they do is they create a problem for themselves, and then they actually motivate their actions out of that problem. So they have to make it hard, and they actually create obstacles. And I thought, those are great things to be aware of, and it's just very simple. And as I took that example with me, it really put into perspective all the human potential brainwashing that's out there about changing your beliefs, changing yourself. And it became clear to me that in personal mastery, to really be a great creator, you focus on your creation, you don't focus on you. And I liken it to being a mother who's having a baby, that her focus is on the baby, not on herself. And I realized that creators are people that focus on their creations. Authors focus on their creations. Great teams focus on their customer. Great bands focus on their music, not their fame. But what I also notice is that when this third-person focus replaced the first person, that the identity was taken out of it. And when the identity was taken out of it, in other words, we construe if we're successful or not successful as defining who we are, that you can use failures as assets, and there's a rapid cycle learning that happens when you realize that whether you succeed or fail is all part of the process, that you treat those two reference points with equal value. So personal mastery was knowing where I was moment to moment in comparison to where I wanted to be, and then using a tool to get leverage toward that without compromising, without positive thinking, but staying honest and accurate, not editing, but seeing it without a lens, and then staying focused on what I wanted to create. In a team setting, you may find that when you are seeing the facts, when you're looking at the current state of the company, when you're looking at shared vision, you may find that your other party, your constituents, your teammates, they have other views. And as you talk, as you look at the vision together, try to go out of yourself and look at it through their eyes. Look at it, if you're in production, look at it through sales eyes. If you're in operations, look at the human resources eyes. If you're not the president, look at it through their eyes. If you're looking at the anybody on the front lines, any technicians, look at it through their eyes, because you'll be able to see a holographic picture, a peripheral picture of the current reality. When we look at current reality, we tend to look at reality in terms of situational. We don't look at pictures. When we think of things structurally, we see patterns that are at play. We see movements. You see, in the East, the way they often think is we see things in circles. We see things in terms of they're referential in terms of interdependence. That when we move one thing in an organization, we obviously cause another. It's a little bit like a mobile, right? You made mobiles when you were little, and you move one thing on the mobile, remember, and everything else would move on the mobile. Or much like a family system, that when one person in the family acts or reacts a certain way, there's a chain reaction. You can instinctively pick up on this because you have the intelligence to, but when you start really becoming conscious of it, as you start exploring your current reality, you kind of think in patterns. So like for me, when I have a desire to act, and resolving that is through action, but that also increases my potential risk, I'm going to resolve that risk through inaction, and I come right back to the desire to act. There's no resolve. There's no advancement. All there is oscillation. Structures are about patterns, and patterns and structures give rise to movement. Structures mean that there are different parts in a system that interact to move or mobilize action a certain way. Ways in which it's reinforced and continues, or ways in which it's balanced out. When you position a desired state, a vision, next to the current state, you're balancing it, and it will seek a resolution. In fact, what the system wants is to seek it right in the middle. It wants it to be in equilibrium. But as you take action upon your vision, as you move toward it on an outcome focus, current reality changes. It moves toward the vision. It resolves the tension in the rubber band. This is why it's important for the team to reflect on where we actually are at all times compared to where we want to be. This is why good accounting becomes critical in an organization to realize the actual state versus the desired state. This is why knowing where we are with our customer, knowing where we are with different metrics in the organization can help us see the current picture compared to the desired one. Rather than reacting and disposing of that picture, remember, we're staying in the frame of the creative. We're acting on the outcome that we seek to create. But see, personal mastery is about seeing a picture of current reality from a pictured standpoint, that there's behavior that's at play. And this gets down to what structure really means. Remember, principle, that the way something is structured gives rise to the movement. The way your building is structured gives rise to the way back to the door. The way your body is structured gives rise to the way the blood flows in it. The way an airplane is structured gives rise to the way it flies. Just like that in our lives, the way patterns are structured between goals and beliefs and concepts that we have and constructs. When we hold a concept, which is a mental construct. So, for example, if I believe currently that we don't have the power to create what we want, and I attempt to move closer to that vision, I'm tethered like a lasso back to that belief. And the more I try to go forward toward the vision, the more the chokehold is going to outlaw my ability to do it. But this action starts to erode over time. This is what I saw in teams, is they start to construct these really great visions, but they don't have touch with current reality. They don't back that vision into a current state. And so the behavior of the structure is tethered to something else, and the path of least resistance is always likely to move where it's easiest to go. So oftentimes they'd say, we have this great vision, we've made a plan, we are committed to this plan, and 6 months later they're totally off course. That's because the underlying structure is not aligned with where they want to go. And you can't fool with structure because it's naturally inclined to go where it's easiest to go. So if the underlying structure is, I want to move decisions out more independently, people get more control, but as they get more control, they start taking liberties with the rules and they make bad decisions, I'm going to want to control more. So I'm back and forth between control and not control. It's like weight loss. I choose to look better, so I take action and I lose the weight, but I increase my hunger. And as I increase my hunger, I eat more. So I'm back to wanting to lose the weight. So we have a lot of conflicting goals. We have conflicting values. And this involves the organization looking at that, looking at those oscillating patterns as part of the current reality, where we're starting from, and then coming to a more simple structure of, this is point A, what is point B, what matters most to us. So in the example with the diet, what matters most to me is to be healthy. And I'll be able to tolerate some of those hunger things because I'm not going to be able to make that go away. It's still going to be there, but I have something more senior than that to choose. I choose. Making choices takes practice. And then in personal mastery, I have to kind of make good on my primary choices. The fundamental choice is to create what I want, is to create a relationship, create a business, so forth. Fundamental means from the underlying structure. It prevails from the origins or the underlying structure from which I take action. I take my cues in the orientation of the creative choice. It happens because I want it to. You understand that when you choose to create something, you are the predominant creative force in your organization. That doesn't mean you don't listen for wise innocence. That doesn't mean you don't incorporate the divine will. Of course you do. You meet it halfway. And the divine will is involved in the quality of your choices because they're coming out of love. The choices you make from love are bringing you into the love that you are. The quality of your action is going to exude from what you love. People that are involved in creations are higher quality individuals. They come into spirit when they create. In fact, their emotional, spiritual, and their intellectual intelligence is required to come together because they're spiritual. The spirit of it is I love it. The mechanics are knowing the technical, the process. And the orientation is knowing where they're going and where they are. So we have the spirit, we have the mechanics, and the orientation. Personal mastery is having some sense of what secondary choices I need to make to produce primary ones. Secondary choices are the actions that I know I need to take that are in service to the primary choices. You can tell this involves discipline, because the reason why I make a secondary choice is not because it suits how I feel. That's not my point of reference. I'm separate from how I feel. It's not because it's immediately gratifying my impulses. It's not because it resolves anything short term. In fact, it requires a long-term frame. My values, my aspirations, I'm hanging in, I'm anchored to like a North Star, those choices. Not the moment, but my frame is more long shot. So if I stay in that frame, that's a choice. It's like saying, I really want to create that weight level. I want to optimize my health, but there's chocolate cake sitting on the table. Ooh, I love chocolate cake. Doesn't mean I deny chocolate cake. As a matter of fact, I know how super normal, alluring that chocolate cake is. In fact, my truth is I don't have the power to control myself on that chocolate cake. That's exactly why I make a choice not to do that. Picasso said the power is in the painting. It's not in the painter. That's a pretty powerful statement. That's that transfer of power in the creation. I suppose that's the mother and the baby. The power is in the baby. So her obedience to the creation is to the creation itself. And having been through a lot of human potential training, all that self-improvement just makes people lousy creators because they keep looking at themselves. Here's the news. You don't need to fix yourself. You don't need to become someone different to create what you want. I think people that see they are operating from something wrong with them have learned that there's a psychological view to creating. But if you talk to creators who professionally create, they don't have a psychological view. They produce something. They don't make it about a psychological view. But someone somewhere in human potential and in some historicity or doctrine has said that it's got to be about our beliefs, it's got to be about that, or we have to change something in us. You can be close to yourself. You can recognize what's going on with you, but make it a hobby. You don't need to change it. You don't need to turn your eyes around and look at you and who we are. Yes, if you have habits and behavior that are misaligned with what you want to create, make a secondary choice. Choose the right behaviors or rituals that support what you want, but it's aligned and motivated with structural tension. What I have now compared to what I want. The rubber band. But the minute that you assume something's wrong with you, then your entire attention becomes about problem solving. I'm going to fix something. This is not about that. Creating is not problem solving, right? But we've somehow gotten this idea that we are not enough and that there is something wrong with us. And so we're recklessly responsible. I reap what I sow. What's going on is a reflection of myself. Therefore, I need to work on that to change myself. Or if I work on my internal, it will change outside. Come on. You don't need to do all that work. Just start creating what you want. I had a guy ask me, hey, JD, I'm going to start a restaurant. What kind of restaurant do you think I should start? I said, well, I think you should start the restaurant you love. He said, great. He said, should I go to school? And I said, what do you think? He said, I don't know. He says, I think I can learn how to create a restaurant by starting a restaurant. He was right. You learn by creating. You learn by bringing something into being because every goal requires a different process. There are no right answers. There's no recipe for success. Geniuses are not copycats. What worked for someone else's goals worked, but what will work for yours is the journey. Every goal requires a creative process. You'll need to innovate, yeah. That's right. But structural tension is motivating that innovation because you're looking towards something you're bringing into being. You're innovating on behalf of it. Will you improvise? Yes. Does everything you're doing need to be justified? Of course not. But structural tension will be at play even in the invisible realms. I don't know why, but structural tension seems to produce synchronicities. People find all of a sudden mysterious experiences. They meet their next employee in the supermarket. They somehow get a text from someone they're thinking about. Structural tension seems to be active in some way in coordinating something. It's the honesty of where you are, and I suppose it's giving your brain really good instructions, and your brain works on many different frequencies. So I think it kind of calls its allies in a sense. It needs help. Because when you know where you are and compared to where you want to be, it starts to look at what's needed. It's not a gap. There's stuff there to work with that you have to work with. So personal mastery is a very, very powerful ingredient. And also in personal mastery, keeping our mental constructs, our mental models within our awareness. That we have to learn to see our own seeing and suspend our own assumptions a lot about what's going on so that we can see the stages that our creations are really in and get clueful and resourceful about what's coming next. Yeah, sometimes it is like dropping into a wave as a surfer. You have to respond and reply to the way the wave is shaping. It's inevitable. But you also have choices about how you're going to ride that wave and the creative process of the way you saw yourself surfing it and the current moment that you're in and bringing those two into one. So that when you finish your ride, you are operating from that creative process. It's like a horse and a jockey. You have to respond and reply to what the jockey wants, but you're in touch with what the horse is doing, what the horse wants. So you try to work with the two. You guide the horse in the direction of where you want to go and how you see the race being played and being done, but you're in the moment recognizing where you are in contrast to where you want to finish the race. And then you take actions accordingly upon what you want to create. The creative process does not guarantee success. This is not some gimmick or some cool thing that you do to summon great powers or any of that. The power isn't in you. The power is in the structure. So to make changes, you change the underlying structure that changes the behavior toward what you want to create. It's really neat to kind of see the structure rather than yourself. There's a quality of separation there between the observer, you, and the creation that you're creating. You are not what you create. You are a creator, and that is a creation. When you connect with the love that you want to create with, you're in the spirit of the divine. It is the most beautiful place to operate from when you're bringing something into being that you just truly care about. This is great. It's clean energy. It's not fear-based. It's not problem-solving. It's not idyllic. It is your true aspirations. It is your heart's desires. Now, what matters to you now may not matter anymore later. That as a business a year from now or as a person, you may find that the content's going to change. And you will change your mind because context is always in motion. In fact, as you're going along, you're listening more deeply to the context because you're taking that intention of what you want to create and putting it at the center of your attention in terms of what you have now. And you begin comparing what you have now as if it's your teacher. You're kind of using the energy of it to get more awake and more clear and learning your vision as you go. Oh, that worked. Oh, that didn't work. Oh, that worked. Oh, that didn't work. Well, what can I learn? Oh, that worked. Well, that didn't work. Oh, that worked. Oh, that didn't work. You take the risk out of it. But you're reflecting on what worked and what didn't work and readjusting and then putting it back in again. It is a process for learning. So at this point, you understand some of the ingredients. You understand what's going into this recipe of shared vision. We've talked about a lot of elements. This was the setup to give you an exposure into the world of creating. Not reacting, but creating. A fundamental choice to be the predominant creative force in your life and your company. We talked about stewardship leadership, the difference between a vision, a plan, a goal, an ideal, a value. So you have a lay of the land. You have now kind of the toolkit. You have some of the ingredients. You're familiar with the lay of the land. In the next audio, we're going to go into the 3 different visions. And they are, vision number 1 is a vivid description of the future, what we call the desired state. Number 2 is a vision of the current reality, the actual picture we have now compared to that desired state. And the 3rd vision is the strategic vision of the process that we're going to assume and position to get there. Because that process is going to be composed of things that you may or may not know how to do. It will require some convention from the past, but also some invention from kind of learning the future by doing. So I look forward to seeing you in audio number 2.